videotaping, I guess I should say. I'm old school. So as we go through our meetings, they are taped and copies of them are in the library. You can actually check them out and see what happened at meetings from years back, ever since we started taping. So now, I'm honored to introduce our presenters this evening. Mariano Reiner is the recently appointed Executive Director of the Boone Conservancy, and Dave Go Hegan is the former Executive Director and is currently the Project Development Associate of that organization. Now, Mary has her MA in Historic Preservation from the University of Kentucky. And there, while she was there, she was the Tau Sigma Delta National Honor Society for Architecture and Allied Arts. She was a member of that prestigious group. And then she was awarded, on top of that, the UK College of Design Colonial Dames Scholarship. Wow. She's also acting secretary of the Kentucky Land Trusts Coalition and the Northern Kentucky Stream Restoration Advisory Committee member, and continues on, doesn't it? Rabbit Hash Historical Society board member. So, as you might imagine, by being on the board of Rabbit Hash, she's highly involved in the restoration efforts of the Rabbit Hash General Store. Mary and the Boone Conservancy are working to procure several conservation easements in Boone County. And also, she's going to play hostess. She's planning a friend-raiser, I love that term, for early fall to kick off their next major project. Now, Dave Go Hegan, I've known Dave for so many years I can't count them. He's spoken to us here in the recent past. He grew up in Cincinnati, earned his master's degree in community planning from UC, and then he served on the Boone County Planning Commission for 25 years, and that's when I first met him. I was the city clerk in Florence, and he was on the Planning Commission. And so we met each other frequently for business purposes. And he retired from there in 2011. He worked extensively with the Boone County Comprehensive Plan, the Western Boone County Study, and the Union Town Plan. Now those were all huge, enormous projects that required, months, if not years of time. And then he also was involved in all kinds of transportation, recreation, and utility planning. So he knows what he's talking about. He received the Bruce Ferguson Award for Lifetime Contributions to Historic Preservation in 2011. And since then, he's opened his own consulting business, doing work with NKU Center for Environmental Restoration. And I think he has a lot to do with airport stuff, doing that environmental restoration business. And in May of 2013, he did become the Executive Director of the Boone Conservancy. Now he helps to initiate and develop conservation projects, and he participates with stewardship and volunteer activities with the citizens of Northern Kentucky. So I'd ask you to join me in welcoming Mariano Reiner and Dave Go Hegan.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and thank you for having us tonight. If you can't hear me, just let me know. I'll be controlling this guy over here too. So, as you mentioned, I'm Mary. This is Dave Go Hegan. I am the newly appointed director. That's key. So Dave will be here to sort of help me along the way tonight. He knows a lot more about our background than I do. Our presentation tonight, let me pull that up really fast. It's titled Preserving the Past and Present for the Future. I chose that title because not only is that what we do, conserve land from the past and the present for the future, but I'm going to speak a little bit about our past, present, and what we plan to do with the future of our organization. So here's our mission statement right here. Maybe you want to speak a little bit about sort of how the board was formed.
This mission statement is a whole lot shorter than the old one. Remember that, Ruth? I think it was a half a page long. The Boone Conservancy came about in 1999, but it arose because of some issues that happened in the mid-90s. There was a certain family in Boone County that wanted to donate their property to a local organization for conservation or preservation, recreation. They couldn't find an organization that they were really keen on, and they wound up giving it to a certain state organization, I won't name. And ever since then, the family and neighbors and people that are affiliated with that property really haven't been that happy with how it's been managed, and it's managed for a whole different purpose than what Boone County thought it was going to be managed for. The organization's doing a good job managing it, but it's for their purpose. And so we said at that time that there really needs to be such an organization that people can go to. There was also another key piece of property in Boone County that was missed. It actually went to a private landowner, and it was basically privately owned right now, never became a preserve, and never became something that the general public can enjoy, for example. And so at that time, we said we need an organization like this, and that's how the Boone County Conservation Conservancy came into being. And I just want to point out that it's not a county department. It's actually a 501c3. We're on a shoestring budget. It's not like we get a bunch of money from the county or the cities or anything like that. We do get some operating money from the county, but we are not a county department, so we're not in the general budget or anything like that. So that's kind of how the Conservancy came to be, and the original board had 30 members on it. Not anymore.
So the way that we function now is that we accept donations of land or purchase land, or accept donation of easements, conservation easements. And we use those lands to create natural spaces or preserve the natural spaces and protect land and wildlife. And then we also facilitate uniting conservancies in the northern Kentucky area. We have a board, we have two boards right now. There's a board of directors as well as an advisory committee. The advisory committee is just one step below. We pull upon them for their particular skill set when it comes to a project. We also have Judge Moore on our board, and he has 4 appointees, and the county commissioner and the Parks Department director. What we've done up to this point, for the most part, is conserve land through the 200 acres of land that we have in our jurisdiction, either under easement or that we own. Just a quick run through. We have 2 easements totaling almost 30 acres, and we have 45 acres that we own at Conservancy Park out in Bellevue Bottoms. And then the Camargo Hunt Club, we have property that we own there, 128 plus acres. Here's a map showing where those are located. The upper left quadrant there with the 2 next to each other are the Camargo Hunt Club properties and Conservancy Park. And then we have the 28-acre easement in the Gunpowder Creek Nature Preserve in the middle there, and then down on the bottom right is the 1-acre easement surrounding a stream in Walton Park, sort of toward the entrance of the park. So what we do now, for the most part, is we conserve land. We're a land conservancy. first and foremost. So we do that through acquiring land and easements through purchase or donation, as I mentioned. And that allows us to protect wildlife and create natural space and parkland, and also to control the non-native invasive species on those lands, which is a growing concern in our county these days. And land conservation also requires a level of community outreach to get our message across and to complete our mission. So we do that through facilitating partnerships with local conservancies and organizations. We act as a pass-through landowner, or we have in the past. And we also take part in nature programs and host nature programs on our properties. So I have broken down here a few pictures of the land that we do have. I think Dave could probably speak better to how we've acquired them and sort of what we use them for. I can keep through here if you can do that.
As we start looking at some of the pieces of property, I want to make it clear that we work very closely with the Boone County Parks and Recreation Department. They are a super bunch to work with. They have a lot of maintenance people. They can go out in the field and do things for us. And so we still do some of that, but they are really a great bunch to work with. They have basically a lease on the 2 properties that we own, and then on 2 properties that they own, we have an easement on that. So all 4 of our projects are very closely coordinated with parks, and we work together on the properties there. We also work together on all the volunteer efforts. And a lot of the publicity and PR and everything at the same time. On the left here is a picture of Gunpowder Creek, which is the largest creek in this county, and it drains actually most of Florence and the airport. And so it has, as some people in this audience can attest to, rather traumatic flooding on occasion. In fact, where I'm standing there in that picture, I'd probably at some time be about 10 feet underwater. And that water's not just standing there either, it's probably going like 25 miles an hour. But even at the same time, it's a beautiful creek, and it handles these floods, which is absolutely amazing. And there's a lot of life in that creek as well. On the right-hand side is a creek in the northern part of the county called Second Creek. And this shows you the difference between an urban runoff stream and a stream that doesn't drain any kind of urban areas or parking lots or subdivisions or anything like that. Very dramatic difference. Walton Park is a great community park. It's right off the interstate in the city of Walton. And running through there was a creek that was all eroded out, and it was another urban stream that basically had some sewage in it. It basically had traumatic floods running through there. And about 10 years ago, there was some airport mitigation, stream mitigation money that went towards this 1 acre, just like the Gunpowder Creek area. So both of those came up because of airport and stream mitigation money. And so it's a national area right in the middle of the park. We are working with the city right now because there have been some invasive species that have come into there, and you've got some, well, they call them weeds, we call them natural plants, but they've got some weeds that grow about 8 or 10 feet tall, and they're right next to the playground. And, you don't want that next to the playground. You can't see the kids going back in there, for example. One of the other plants actually has leaves that envelop the stem and catch rainwater and store the rainwater in there, so you got a lot of mosquitoes. So we've been in there knocking these plants out and replacing them with a lot of native grasses and native plants and so forth. You can see some of the flowers that you can find in there. The wildflowers are not quite as flashy as the cultivated flowers, but they're actually prettier when you find them. Our flagship is basically Conservancy Park, and this is just past Dinsmore, just past Middle Creek on Kentucky 18 down in Bellevue area. And this was a gravel pit, and it was eyesore of the week in the Boone County Recorder, like probably every 3 months throughout the year. So it was a disaster. I mean, there were old refrigerators, there was construction debris, there were old engines in there, there was oil in there, there's actually a sunken dredge barge in that lake right now. It makes a great fish cover. If you ever go there fishing, you gotta go around the right-hand side of the lake, and it's 40 yards out, you gotta cast way out. That's where all the fish are. So this is by the driveway, the parking lot of that area. And this is a rain garden that we built a couple of years ago. And this has got all native wildflowers planted in it. And this has really turned out neat. And what the purpose of this was to try to keep some of the drainage coming off the road and off the surrounding area from creating hillside slippage into the lake, which was a real problem there. So this takes the water, slows it down, takes it around that area and around into the lake in a very gradual fashion, so we're not having these landslides. And this is that rain garden in March on the left. We set fire to it. It's a pretty neat project. And we did 5 acres last year back in Park, and 3 acres burned in 2 minutes 38 seconds. It was pretty intense. But this is what the rain garden looks like right now. And you can see what that does is it knocks down some of the invasive species and starts bringing back the native species, which really like. They basically thrive on fire. It's almost a certain time of year. Can we talk about Camargo? Okay. Camargo is our largest property, and it's 130 acres. And it's almost right next to the Conservancy Park. It's only about 150 feet away. We'd like to connect them someday. We just haven't been able to make it happen. This is a really neat piece of woods. This is really almost like a primeval forest back in there. And you don't see all that honeysuckle growing in there. I mean, you got native trees and plants and everything. You can see where you're going. There is a lot of wildlife, a lot of birds in there and everything. If you get to the top of the property, you can actually see the river from there. So you can actually have a river view up over there. Right now, it's basically used for horseback riding, as are some of the adjacent parcels. We would like to open up better access to this in the future and really develop a world-class hiking trail back in there. We are talking about sponsoring a hike in here in September, October, probably October of this year. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll have to get access off of adjacent property and hike everybody in there. It's a pretty big hike actually in there as well. The size of the piece of property. This is a pretty
Yeah, it's a good one. So Dave spoke more about the conservation aspect of our organization, but we're always moving in different directions. One of those directions we're focused on right now is community outreach, just getting people interested in nature and being outside again and conservation. So we are involved in a lot of different nature programs. We'll host, along with the Parks Department, we'll host nature programs on our properties, host walks on our easements that aren't necessarily open to the public all of the time. We have pollinator garden, plantings. We were involved in the Wild Ones campaign. That's the picture of the monarch butterfly on the bottom right there, where we took larvae from campers and stored, we had them inside in a butterfly cage and just kind of watched them grow, and then they hatched and then we set them free. So just different things like that are ways that we get people interested in nature to come out onto our properties. We also have volunteers who help control the invasive populations in our easements. Those are Thomas More students, I believe, who come out to our Walton Park easement and pull invasive species out. We also get involved in larger campaigns. This was Reforest Northern Kentucky from this past April. I believe we did it the last 2 years as well. We were involved as sponsors and volunteers. So people come out and they plant trees in different parks. This was at EI Park this year. So we went and volunteered there and sponsored it. We also just show up at different events. So I went out to a field trip. These are some Walton Middle School students planting trees at Walton Park. And they also walked through our easement, which was really cool. And the Parks Department of Boone County sort of educated them on different plants in our easement. And they helped pull some onion that we didn't want there and things like that. So. And all of that is to just get people interested in nature. Like I said, we're really focused on getting a new generation of people outside, interested in conservation. We just had a conversation a few days ago about how most people are interested in conservancy, they just don't really know it. But it really does a lot for the community, keeping that green space alive and in a natural state. And really, we're just trying to cultivate a new generation of people to fill our shoes one day, because we do like to protect these lands in perpetuity and forever and for future use, so we need someone to take that over. So speaking of the future, we've talked a lot about what we have done up to this point with the Boone Conservancy, and so now we're sort of switching gears into what we would like to see happen, or what we would like to get more involved in the future of our organization. So the three major things that we're sort of focusing on at this point for the future are getting involved in stream mitigation, sort of the business side of things to conserve wetlands and watershed to continue our mission in Boone County. We also want to get more involved in cultural historic resources, focus more on historically and culturally significant lands to preserve the traditional landscape of Boone County, not just the natural landscape. And also to continue to build up those partnerships with other organizations, like organizations in our area, to have a regional impact and to increase interest in nature and conservation, ultimately. So stream mitigation is kind of the first thing we'll delve into a little bit more. You're probably the guy to speak about this more than me.
This is, as Mary is saying, we're kind of getting into some new ways of doing business. In the old days, the land conservancy would kind of wait for a donation to come in, or wait for a property donation or something like that. Well, as you can well imagine, that takes forever. You hardly have any success in doing that. In fact, the two properties that we own, we did buy those properties. They weren't donated. They were actually purchased. So we're kind of modeling after a project that happened about 2 years ago, and this was known as the Piner property, which was 236 acres, almost across from Mid-Bow Lake State Park. Of course, they call it State Historic Site now. And that property was actually purchased through, and first of all, we worked on it for 15 years, but it was actually purchased mainly through stream mitigation monies. And then there was also something called bat mitigation monies thrown in, which is a story in itself. And then the Nature Conservancy threw some monies in too. And they held title to it for a while, and they ultimately turned it over in title to the state historic site. So it's actually added on to the park now. So the park, instead of being 500 acres, is now over 700 acres. And I'm not sure they really know what to do with it yet, but it's a cool piece of property. There's also a lot of easements immediately adjacent to that property, and the way those easements got there is again through the stream mitigation. And what this is I mean, I could spend days talking about it, but basically it is where a developer or the airport or major utility is making a major improvement, and they're required to mitigate the impact that they have on the streams that they're relocating or changing. And one of the options is that they can put it into this fund called an in lieu fee program, and NKU typically administers that for North Kentucky. You may have seen some of this in the news as far as developers and NKU getting some pretty interesting discussions. It's also become very political over the last year or so. But it's an interesting way to actually raise money to acquire properties or acquire easements. So that's one of the areas that we're looking into. We're not sure if the Conservancy could become one of those administration type agencies at this point or not. There's a heck of a lot into it. There's a lot of technical hoops you have to jump through. You have to deal with the Corps of Engineers, which a lot of you probably know that takes a long time. That's not a pleasant experience sometimes. But so we're looking into those new areas, those new ideas on how to bring monies in. The bat mitigation is basically dealing with the Indiana bat, which is endangered. And so if you cut down certain kinds of trees, when you're doing a development, you have to actually inventory those and actually pay into a bat mitigation fund, which is administered by U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And so there are these partners, these potential partners out there that we're starting to work with. And what we bring to the table is the potential for raising private donations to match their monies. So all of a sudden you have 4 or 5 different pots of money going into a project, and then you can actually pull it off. And it could be something like behind the property. So it's exhilarating, it's also kind of scary because you have to hire a lot of consultants and all that kind of thing. It'll be tough.
Okay, so in addition to the stream mitigation aspect, we're also looking to focus more on the cultural historic aspect of our mission statement. We actually have that directly in our mission statement. And the fact of the matter is, when we're on these historic landscapes, we often find historic resources or historic buildings. So while preserving these lands, we're also kind of conserving the historic resources that are on them, or at least drawing attention to them, or even discovering them to some extent. So we would like to get more involved in that aspect of conservation, is the preservation aspect, because really they go hand in hand. Some of the ways we've already done that is being involved in the Section 106 process of the National Historic Preservation Act. We were consulting parties in the stream mitigation project that NKU Center for Environmental Restoration undertook. So we were consulting parties in that. We were also in the MOA for that project. And we're sort of in the process of being involved in the historic documentation that was suggested that they undertake to mitigate the adverse impacts they will have on the historic property, or the historic resources on this historic property. So we'll be involved in doing that as well. The fact of the matter is, conservation and preservation work so closely together. It's very easy to use one as a tool for another, and we're sort of looking for new ways to do that. Another thing we're doing in the future is building up our partnerships. As we've mentioned, we already partner with the Boone County Park System on several nature programs projects. They maintain our Conservancy Park as well. But we're also involved with other conservancies in Northern Kentucky. We have an umbrella organization that we're a part of, so that we have more of a regional impact on land. We're members of the Kentucky Land Trust Coalition as well. And we just like to get involved and show our face at events with like organizations like the Boone County Historical Society at the Sparity marker donation. So we're just trying to get more involved in these with these organizations in the future. And we're always trying to find creative ways to partner as well to fulfill our mission and our future goals. We've discussed things like purchasing land with other organizations so that the land can be used for all the parties that are involved. We've also talked about conserving land to preserve the historic resources that are on the property. And also buying property for use in stream mitigation that will benefit developers as well as conservationists and allow for easier conservation. And we're always looking for more ways to involve like parties and to conserve areas in Boone County and in the entire region. Do you have anything else to add? Yeah. So with that, we'd like to open up the floor for any suggestions on how to maybe get involved with other organizations, partnering, just any questions that anybody might have. Yes.
I have a question about the Camargo Hunt Club. How did that property, what interest aren't they in Cincinnati principally, or were principally? How did they decide to purchase property, or did they, in Boone County? And what is your relationship to this?
You might.
They got into Boone County, as Betsy mentioned, they're pretty much an Indian Hill, east side of Cincinnati, on the west side. But they're pretty much from the east side of Cincinnati. And Dick Ammon of Ammon Nursery was really the Boone County contact. I don't think probably most of them knew anything about Boone County at all. But they were looking for a place where they didn't have to spend a fortune. And so about 25 years ago, I guess, they bought that property out there. And then they talked with all the adjacent property owners and said, hey, we want to ride horses and run foxes, across your property. And so they got permission from a lot of neighbors, and they were riding on probably about 8 different properties. And it's a lot of acreage if you add it all up together. They started buying some property in Owen County after that. And so they had an operation there in Owen County at this point. And so really all they're doing, they still own about 7 or 8 acres in Camargo. All they do is keep some of the dogs there, and that's about all they're doing. They only ride on that probably a few times a year now. And so it's always been kind of a point of discussion. Do horses belong in that valley or not because of the soil types and all that kind of thing. And they actually ride through Middle Creek Park, which is adjacent to that as well. So that's how the Boone Conservancy came into play, is that the Camargo Hunt Club adjoins the 100-acre Middle Creek Park, which is a Boone County park, system park. And so the woods is very pristine on both properties, and it's connected. And so they basically approached the Boone Conservancy and said, hey, would you like to buy this for what we bought it for? And in the meantime, about 20 years had gone by probably. So there's a good deal. We still had to buy it, but there was a lot of private donations to make that happen. In fact, it was all private donations to make it happen. And so whenever we go on a property, we basically need to call in and say, hey, we want to park out here, we want to walk into the site. Kind of a funny story, we had a Boy Scout troop that got lost in Middle Creek Park. And so they called the parks office, and they got Dave Whitehouse on the phone, and Dave knew the scout troop leader. And he said, here's what you do. Get your scouts to start barking like dogs. And the guy said, what are you talking about? And he said, do it. So he did. About 3 or 4 of the scouts started barking. And all of a sudden the hound dogs that were there on Camargo, there's probably about 40 of them there. They created a big ruckus. And Dave said on the phone, he said, "You hear that? Just walk towards that." So we're sure to pull that in the future if anybody gets lost. Any other questions?
Is there a thin line between the parks, Buchanan Park, and this? If you have to, you know, like run it with the park system, Buchanan take over?
Boy, that's a good question, and that is, if something ever happened to the Boone Conservancy and we weren't around, what would happen? You know, where would the properties go? We're in this for good. I mean, this is a permanent thing. All these easements are permanent. And so, I guess if the Boone Conservancy were to dissolve at some point off in the future, then we would basically sell these assets off. And it wouldn't necessarily be Boone County that would pick them up. It might be, but there are actually private firms out there that will maintain conservation properties, preservation type properties. So I couldn't really say where the properties would go, but we do have, they are counted as an asset for the Boone Conservancy. So, I mean, they would basically be sold off, I think is what would happen. Because now there's there'd be a lot of good reason for them to go to the county because they do lease the properties from us right now.
Thin line right there.
Yeah. Now, the actual easements that we have, for example, on Gunpowder Creek and Walton Park, those would not be able to go to the county because they're actually property. In fact, actually, the city of Walton probably owns Walton Park, is that right? Anyway, because you cannot have the same, the easement holder has to be a different entity than the property owner. And so what would happen in the case of Gunpowder Creek is that easement would probably be held by the State Heritage Council or something along those lines. In fact, the state already has an easement on there too. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
That's it.
Okay. Question over here.
So your October hike at the Camargo property, how many miles do you think that's going to be? You said big.
There is actually a hike that Boone County Parks is sponsoring in June. I can't remember the date. I think we had a date.
It's on our website.
And that one's going to start in Middle Creek. At that parking area there, it's going to go up through the park and then over the ridge and into Camargo. And that is a long hike, because I did that one a couple months ago, and that's probably a mile to actually get in there. And then hike around and then come back out. And it's all pretty rough terrain back in there. The one at Camargo, we could probably accomplish that in walking 1 mile if we parked where the dogs are located. So, but it's kind of rugged. I mean, it's because the horses have been there and the trail's a little bit rough. And if it rains, it gets pretty muddy. And it's a little bit on the rugged side. But I would say we could probably do that in a mile. That's not that long.
Right. Thank you.
In the back.
Do you have or have you considered developing any kind of educational programs with the Boone County schools?
Yeah, in fact, we're looking for somebody from the school district, either retired or active, to be a board member. Yes, we definitely have. And we just really haven't pulled that off yet. As Mary showed that one slide with the trees going all different directions, it's kind of one of those things that's on the list. We just haven't got there, but it's a great idea. As a side note, that was one tree. It was a bunch of trees.
I'd say that at this point, we're achieving that in some way by having the park system sort of tagging on to their programs as well. So we'll host a lot of their programs and things like that.
That's a good point, because Boone County Parks has a partnership with Boone County Schools and all the playgrounds and those kind of things, so they work together on those, quite a bit, ball fields, everything. Yes, Steve?
You talked about the Middle Creek Park. Does this include the Boone Cliffs Nature Preserve?
That's a good question too, an interesting story. I guess Steve asked about Boone Cliffs, which, who's been out hiking Boone Cliffs before? Wow, awesome. Be careful, the sheriff is now towing people who park on the road. Boone Cliffs is such a popular spot, and it is really unique. There's only a few places like that on this continent when you get right down to it. I mean, it's really unique. So,
Where is Boone Cliffs?
Boone Cliffs is located, if you stay on Kentucky 18 here and go west through Burlington, all the way out, and just before you get to the Dinsmore House, you turn left on Middle Creek Road, and it's probably about 2 miles back or something like that. It's basically a glacial outcropping. The Nature Conservancy bought it back, it was 75 acres, they bought it probably back in the 1970s, mid-70s, I think. And so they maintained it for a while. Well, as soon as Boone County bought it from the Nature Conservancy, which was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, as soon as they did that and put out a brochure on it and put it in the park system information, man, everybody's out there now. I mean, it is really, really being loved to death, basically. And it's a really neat place, a lot of conglomerate rock outcroppings, and some plants that are growing in there that you don't find around here anywhere else, and pretty neat. So it's basically owned by Boone County now and maintained by Boone County. Boone County is very good at maintaining and scheduling ball fields. This is something new for them, and so we're going to be assisting them in, trail design, trail maintenance, what to do about the ash trees, and there's a lot of issues when you take on property in there, but currently it is owned by Boone County.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Bruce Ferguson, 35 years ago or more, spent the night in one of the caves just to be doing it.
I believe it. There are caves back here. You're not supposed to get off the trail and go into the caves.
Well, that was a long time ago. There were still artifacts back in there, isn't there?
Yeah. Now, another interesting thing about the history of Boone County is John Uri Lloyd, who's a famous Boone County author. This was about 1900, somewhere around there. He wrote a book, I think it was maybe Stringtown on the Pike.
That was one of his books.
Okay. Well, one of his books was based on, or had a lot of Boone Cliffs in it. We'll talk a lot about Boone Cliffs. Now, he placed it, he took some license with it, and he placed it in Gunpowder Creek. It's actually in the Middle Creek watershed. But so he described Boone Cliffs in one of his books. Pretty awesome history there. The other really unique site, probably even more unique than Boone Cliffs, is Split Rock and Kirby Rock and some of those properties at the mouth of Wilbur Creek. So those are between Bellevue and Petersburg on the Ohio River. And
My dad and that generation of people when they were young, and the river was not affected by Martha Dam or anything. That was a very popular place.
absolutely.
And And of course, in those days, there was no Kings Island or anything like that. It was just the idea that those people made their own fun, and Split Rock was a very popular spot.
Yeah, what Asa was pointing out is that there were actually river boats that came from Cincinnati on a day excursion. And people would come out there to the Split Rock area and actually have picnics out there. And really amazing place. In fact, I heard a story that there was the Lazarus family from Cincinnati used to go out there quite a bit. And this is probably 100 years ago or more. And they also took trips to Italy, which is where the family's from. And one of the little boys in the family brought back some lizards with him. Lizards.
Say that again.
Reptiles, lizards. And he brought them back from Italy. And he let them go down there at Split Rock and on the other side of Wilbur Creek. So I've never seen them, but I hear tell that these lizards are still multiplying and running around. A lot of stories out there. But that's another example of a piece of property where, if it ever became available someday, we should be in a position to act on it. And as Mary was talking about, kind of reorganizing the Boone Conservancy a little bit, we want to, I guess when people donate to the Conservancy, it's really not that cool just to donate for operating expenses or something like that, But a lot more people are thrilled about donating if they've got a really cool project in front of them. So what we want to do is basically have a land acquisition fund, and we can start building that fund. And then when the property becomes available, it's a priority. And then we can partner with other organizations, have all those monies work together, and then we can make it happen instead of scrambling at the last minute and not having the resources to make it happen. So, yeah, we're going to grow a little bit. We're looking forward to it.
Am I correct that the only way to see Split Rock now is from the water? I mean, that's private property, there's a gate.
That's correct. The question was the only way to see Split Rock is from the water, and that's true right now. The property owner that owns it had a lease for a while with a conservation organization that actually ran a nature preserve on there, and you could go and visit the property. I think it was like $75 or something like that for like a school group or something along those lines to go out there. Or you could actually call up that nonprofit board that was running the nature preserve and ask if you can go in. But since then, the lease is no longer in existence, so it is just private property. But if you, it's kind of, if you're interested in being on the river in a canoe and everything, it's a great place to canoe too. And there are some locals that jump off the rock into the water too, but please be careful if you do that. There are other rocks over there. You gotta watch the local do it first. Any other questions?
I just have an invitation. Inasmuch as your goal right now is to make Boone Countyans aware of the organization, and you have brochures to distribute and everything, we host, along with the historic Burlington Business Association, we host Heritage Day. Judge Moore kind of coerced us into doing this initially with the Boone County Historical Society partnering with the Business Association there in Burlington. And so we got into it, and much to my surprise, it has been more and more successful with each year. And so we open our history museum to people to come through. Sometimes we have some children's activities that Katie's very familiar with. We open, the Historical Society sponsors other things like chair caning, all kinds of crafters and so forth. In fact, this year we're having artists from the student artists from the schools come out and have a contest for them. The older kids get down on hands and knees with chalk on the parking lot of the county administration building, and they do marvelous artwork, and we give awards every year and so forth. And we display all kinds of old-time farm equipment, household utensils. We even have some, a sleigh, an old-fashioned horse-drawn sleigh, and various things. And in the last few years, we've had antique cars. And the lot gets, a part of the lot gets filled with the old cars. And Green Line sends out their old bus from 1953. It's a great thing, and it's been growing by leaps and bounds. We invite you to be part of that. You can set up a table. We've been hosting the Boone County Visual Arts Association with all their artists in the side yard. We have llamas. We have just everything, and people are coming to it. So come on out, and that's on July 9. It's a Saturday from 9 to 3. And we'll need volunteers from our organization too, the staff, the museum, and so forth. So come out and put your information out for people to get aware of. We think that would be a good idea for you to do. So, anyway, are there other questions? Asa?
Would it be completely ridiculous and out of line if I said a few words about the 3C camp?
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great. Let me release them from their Mary, you may not have, do you have a copy of From Macedons to the Millennium?
No, I don't.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
She's already, and you may have that along with some other materials.
Wonderful.
And,
Thank you so much.
and Dave's already, you probably already got a copy of the book, right?
Yeah.
So we can't give you.
Got all the books.
You got all the books. So we just want to express to you our appreciation for your coming and speaking to us tonight.
Thank you.
And that's great.